During this Lenten season, Jesus invites us to see ourselves and each other through the eyes of love, not judgment. Dear friends, the passage of the Gospel for our reflection today speaks about the Samaritan woman. At the start of the homily, let me ask you to take a moment and see what you think about the woman at the well. Who was she? What type of a person was she? Often she is portrayed as a bad character. When we look at the passage itself, we see that the problem is not with the narrative itself. It was with the way preachers and commentators often mistreated the central character. Long before I was old enough to understand John's Gospel, I knew that the woman at the well was sensuous, promiscuous, unchaste, and immoral. In most sermons, often she is described quite explicitly as an immoral person, a fallen woman. And the grace of the story in this version, or the good news, resided in nothing more than Jesus forgiving her. God even forgives the sins of such a woman. I'm not blaming anyone because that type of a reading is possible and had been the most popular. The early fathers of the church, like Tertullian, Origen, and John Chrysostom, branded her as a bad person in need of healing from carnal desires. Almost everyone describes her as having a shady past before meeting Jesus at the well, but she is regarded as the first missionary after meeting Jesus. Let's come to the narrative itself. The truth is that nowhere in the description is the Samaritan woman labeled as promiscuous. Nowhere does Jesus imply that she is a sinner or tells her, as he tells so many others, to go and sin no more. So, we can clearly see that this is obviously not a story about morality. It is not a story about Jesus liberating a woman from her own carnal desires. Then we can ask ourselves, what is the main point of this story? To put it briefly, it is a story about Jesus revealing himself as a Messiah to a fellow human being in whom he sees genuine spiritual hunger and a learned and engaged mind and a tremendous gift for testimony and discipleship. Many homilies are preached looking for a reason for her coming to the well at noontime. In my opinion, to understand that, we have to go to the previous chapter of the same Gospel, that is chapter 3 of St. John's Gospel. Here we have Nicodemus coming to meet Jesus at night. Perhaps the evangelist John uses the midday to contrast it with the night in the previous chapter. There may be nothing more to her going to the well to draw water during the midday than just a literary technique used by the author. Let us take the contrast between Nicodemus and the woman at the well a little farther. Some obvious things are seen. Nicodemus was a learned Pharisee who enjoyed power as a member of the Sanhedrin, and he was influential, and he was rich. In contrast, the woman is most probably poor and not much educated, a socially outcast, at least in the eyes of the Orthodox Jews. Though learned, Nicodemus proved that he was ignorant about the deeper truths of the scriptures. The woman, on the other hand, though not much educated, displays a great sense of curiosity and a readiness for learning higher things. And the Lord is pleased and impressed. So much, even to reveal to her his real identity. She becomes the first person to whom the Lord unequivocally declares that he is the Messiah. What a privilege! She does not keep that privilege to herself, but is ever ready to share it with her people. Thus, most strikingly, she is the first believer in any of the Gospels to straightway become a messenger of the good news, and she is the only one to bring her entire village to the saving knowledge of Jesus. Often people find it difficult to digest her past of having 5 husbands and now living with someone who is not her husband. There can be any number of reasons why the woman might have the past she has. Perhaps she was married off as a teen bride, then widowed and passed along among her dead husband's brothers, as per the Levirate marriage practice of the day. Perhaps her various husbands abandoned her because she was barren. Whatever the case, we know that in the first century, women did not have the legal power to end their own marriages. The authority to file for divorce always rested with men alone. She appears to be a victim of the circumstances and practices of the patriarchal society. So we have to acknowledge that there is a great deal that we do not know about the woman's history. We can find tremendous good news in the way Jesus engages with the woman. Jesus' dialogue with the woman at the well is his longest recorded conversation in the New Testament. This story offers a lot of good news we can carry into our own Lent journey and practices. At the time Jesus meets the woman at the well, the enmity between Jews and the Samaritans is ancient, entrenched, and bitter. The two groups disagree about everything that matters: how to honor God, how to interpret the scriptures, and how and where to worship. They practiced their faith in separate temples, read different versions of the Torah, and avoided social contact with each other whenever possible. In short, they simply hated each other. The enmity between the Jews and the Samaritans in Jesus' day is not theoretical, it is embodied and real. The differences between them are not easily negotiated. Each is fully convinced that the other is wrong. So what Jesus does when he enters into the Samaritan village and starts a conversation with a woman is radical and risky. It even stuns his own disciples. Moreover, the Samaritan is a woman, and it is not customary or appropriate for Jesus, a Jewish man, to converse alone with a Samaritan woman, much less to ask her for a drink of water. Simply put, it is not done. To put this in more contemporary language, the Samaritan woman is the other, the alien, the heretic, the stranger, the foreigner. She represents all the boundaries that must not be transgressed in religious living. She represents all the spiritual taboos that must not be broken. But Jesus breaks them all anyway, because that is the right thing to do. The mode of behavior of Jesus wins him a close disciple and a village full of disciples. During this Lenten season, Jesus invites us to see ourselves and each other through the eyes of love, not judgment. Can we, like Jesus, become soft landing places for people who are all alone, or for people carrying stories that are too heavy to bear? To see brokenness without shaming it is not easy, but it is what we are called to do. Acceptance begins with clear, tender, and unconditional seeing, and to see in this manner requires grace. May God bless you all with His graces.